So Rogan opened it up, I thought, in a really thoughtful way, where he's like, I dismissed you, like everybody dismisses you because you're anti-vax, and that's a really powerful label. Like, I'm not anti-vax. I think they're probably really good. And he's like, but then during COVID, when I actually started thinking about this stuff, I read your book, and like I found it fascinating, and and I'm curious now about what you have to say. And he's like, I want to give you a platform here to just talk. I'm not going to interrupt you. I'm not going to argue with you. I just want to hear you talk. And RFK talked for like an hour and a half about vaccines.
All of them, though,
And
not just COVID. That's the
all
thing.
yeah, talking about vaccines very specifically. And
Yeah.
like obviously, when you hear someone smart talking about a subject they're interested in, it's very convincing. He said something really beautiful, I thought, which I think is like probably the reason he's going to be appealing going forward. Which he was telling the story about how he first got into this whole anti-vax thing. He was an environmental lawyer, and I think he was suing a company for mercury poisoning of the polluting of some sort. There was a group of women who claimed their kids became intellectually
Autistic?
had no I don't want to use the word like mentally handicapped. I don't want to say like there were intellectual disabilities because of
I
this
only
mercury
say that
poisoning.
because that was the claim for a long time. I don't know if he was
Well,
linked to
well,
that.
yeah, well, so he was involved in that, and this group of women kept coming to him at these like events saying, "We want to talk to you about the links between vaccines and autism," and he's like, "No, stop." But it was happening like for a long time, and then he said finally this woman rang his doorbell with a stack of papers 18 inches thick, and she said, "I'm not leaving your doorstep until you read this." And what he said that was nice, which he said, when a mother tells you about her child, you should listen. He said, these women were coming to me, no one was listening, and I thought someone should listen to them because mothers know their children. And if they have something to say about their child, we should at least listen to them because they might have something interesting to say. Which I thought was really powerful and a really powerful way into the
Have
story.
you ever seen a lot of mothers? Have you seen mothers talking about their children in your day, like in your thing? Most of them are absolutely batshit crazy.
He's a
You ever seen
monster. He's a monster.
The mothers complaining to the daycare about their child are the craziest ones in the batch. It's the ones who don't say anything.
Right.
Most normal moms are like, I don't know.
Well, he was trying to establish like I wasn't looking for a fight, and I wasn't, and I don't identify with like the craziest people who support me. I come at this as a scientist, and whatever you think of it. And then he spoke for an hour and a half in like a very convincing way about how there's basically I think his point. I think his point is we don't know exactly how the vaccines are affecting children because the studies that need to be done aren't being allowed to be done because of the corporate interests tied up with the NIH and the CDC. So like there's some very good indications that they're having harmful effects, but we can't actually know that because the studies aren't allowed to be done. So then I called my friend up, and I was the same friend who I was talking about COVID vaccines with, and I was like, did you see this? I didn't say that. I was gonna get to this. I was like, you should come on the podcast and talk about it, but I didn't even get there because he got very upset by the idea of RFK, and he pointed me to this YouTube channel of this guy who refuted the entire book, and like,
How did that sound to you? Did you watch it?
I watched it. The guy himself, I want to get him on the podcast. The guy himself, I don't like his attitude and like his posturing really. But I mean, his kind of basic point is like you could make an argument kind of in both directions. Like sort of RFK and his cohort make an argument of like they're Fauci is making so much money off of these vaccines. And like, but he doesn't talk about how much money he's making off the books, and like he's making a ton of money, and all the people on anti-vax YouTube are making a ton of money.
And money doesn't necessarily equate to a bad incentive. It just
that's the argument they make that the CDC and Fauci, they're all making a ton of money off these things, so we can trust them. So that's kind of like the his general direction of like they're sort of being dishonest in their like approach. As far as like the actual studies go, I have no idea what he's talking about.
I mean, you know what's harmful to children? Polio. So,
right.
Like, I don't know what he's talking about.
Right. I mean, and then you imagine
use your like inner brain a little bit. You know what's harmful to children? Measles. You know what's harmful to children? Whooping cough. Much more harmful than the some percentage of kids that may be affected by vaccines adversely. Like my whole issue with that is like there are such cases, I'm sure, of people who are affected adversely, but I think as we've lived as human beings over the last 3 years in medical innovation, we've seen the overwhelmingly positive effects of infectious diseases being eradicated by vaccines.
His argument, I think, is that, again, I'm not supporting or
No,
I'm
relaying.
saying
You're relaying.
relaying what he said was like the autism and allergies and obesity and chronic illness have spiked. This country is massively unhealthy, and one of the things you can point to is vaccines. So yes, they will prevent polio and whooping cough, but they degrade our immune system to a point where we're getting much, much sicker from other stuff that we shouldn't be getting sicker from.
That is
we're getting allergies,
claim.
Autism. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what he's saying.
Okay,
like,
so
yes,
fill that
polio,
gap. That could all be true. Those are all going up. We also eat like crap. We also live longer to see new diseases.
Right,
we also do a lot of different things.
So
I'm not coming at him. I'm just like, I didn't watch the episode, so it's not fair for me to say anything really. Yeah, maybe they covered that. Maybe that was a question posed to him.
So I mean, what I like about Joe Rogan is he's not there to debate. He lets people say what they're interested in. He's a very sort of like vulnerable, like intellectually vulnerable, curious person. So like the guy sounds smart, and Joe Rogan's like, oh my God, you're right. Why am I giving vaccines? Like Wi-Fi radiation? Oh my God, why do we have our Wi-Fi? You're right. So he like completely buys into it moment by moment, the same way I do. Yeah. So it was interesting, and at first, when I saw he went on Rogan, I was like, "Whoa, this is gonna be a really big turning point." And now that he did that thing, I have a feeling it's gonna be a little bit more mainstream, probably to parrot those ideas. And I do think he's gonna get like bigger and bigger and more interesting to follow. So,
well, I will say this: I know that Joe Rogan historically, before he was the Joe Rogan we know that he is today, has conspiratorial leanings like you do. He likes like secret cover-up kind of things. Those appeal to him. And over the years, he's moved away from his early days podcasts were about had subjects about moon landing fakery and stuff like that. And over the years, he's gotten more informed and more open and away from some of those stuff. But when it gets turned on in him again, you can see him being like, he like lights him up a little bit. But
so the thing that's confusing for me is that the vaccine stuff beautifully dovetails with the stuff that Joe Rogan's interested in and most people are interested in now, which is like the corporate capture of government agencies.
And I think post-COVID.
And he, especially post-COVID. So the way he talks about the war in Ukraine is the same way he talks about autism and vaccines. I don't necessarily know if both of those can be conflated, but he does it. And it's pretty compelling and fun to listen to. And it's a really good narrative, and it's dramatic, and it's interesting. So, like, people are going to want to hear it more and more and more.
But the correlation causation issue is the issue. It's like there's a lot more immigrants from a certain part of the world in this part of the country today, and more people are vaccinated. Clearly, vaccines are leading to more immigration.
He gets a lot more granular than that.
I know. I have to look into the details.
Yeah.
But the thing that's interesting to me, that's now happening right now, like this week, is there's this doctor, Hortez. I think it's Peter Hortez. Peter Hortez. Have you seen it?
Hortez the Killer? No.
Okay, all over Twitter right now, there's clips of Dr. Peter Hortez, who I think is like, what's his position? What is his position?
Is he the guy who had the tweet battle with Rogan?
Yes. I forget his position. I want to get it right. Something with pediatric medicine. And there's one video of him.
Xander?
There's one video of him in 2020, okay? Talking about how we should be concerned about the vaccines a little bit. We have to make sure there's no harmful effects, and these are things we should be worried about. And then within a fell swoop, like it's a compilation, so it could be skewed a little, but then it's him basically all in on vaccines, all for your kids, for everybody. Keep getting your kids. And once we get these 2 doses, this is the 2-dose vaccine. Then they do another clip. We're going to have to get a 3rd booster. 4th and 5th boosters are going to be necessary to stop this thing. And it just keeps going. Anyway, so there's this huge compilation that's going around. And he went off on Joe Rogan's thing, criticizing the whole RFK thing like a crackpot. This is
right. Just he tweeted a Vice article, right?
Yes, like
yeah.
I want to find the thread. It's worth looking at. But he started this thread of tweeting a Vice article discrediting RFK and Rogan as harmful and misinformation, disinformation, all the things we're used to hearing from dissenters of Joe Rogan. And then Joe Rogan said, why don't you come on and debate RFK? And then it got to a whole back and forth on that, where he's like, I'm not gonna, platform these people. I'm not gonna dignify this with a response. This is why I don't debate conspiracy theorists. Then Mark Cuban gets in on it and says, that's why I created low cost plus drugs. and then goes off on Rogan, which is weird. I like Mark Cuban's like this figure you kind of respect, and he's cool, Mark Cuban says, you're now the mainstream media, Joe Rogan. You're now the blah, blah, blah. You're the whatever. And just calls them out as being captured and being like into this narrative and all of that. But now there's this whole, then Patrick Bet-David, a guy I've been impersonating recently, gets on and says, okay, let's assess these for a second. Let's assess these. And he puts a whole thread down. Why not debate? What are you scared of? What are you this? All these things that have gone on.
And Rogan offered him $100,000 to debate, right?
Now, their argument is always like, I'm not going to dignify this with a response. And I sort of agree that not every wacky idea deserves to be platformed and debated. Somebody get up there and saying, I think gravity's a myth or birds aren't real. They don't necessarily need to be debated. However, if the wackiest ideas or obscure ideas started to get really resonant with a lot of people, and you find yourself on the biggest podcast in the world talking about it and getting all this attention, then it behooves people who have better ideas, according to them, to debate them. Because whether they like it or not, everybody's responding to RFK and all these ideas. So now, whether you think it's conspiracy or not, like, you don't have to debate flat earthers, but if all of a sudden flat earth was really trending and getting all this attention and legitimacy, like, then I think it's responsible scientists and physicists should go and debate a flat earther and explain why it's ridiculous and put it to rest. But to hide and say no, like, yeah, not everything deserves a response or a debate, but once it becomes a resonant platformed idea already, you kind of have to. That's how I think.
I agree, and also I also think the guy Hortez is probably overestimating.
I like how you just pronounced his name.
I respect it. How many people are gonna watch? Like, Rogan had on this guy came on to talk about how Twitter was silencing dissident voices, and so he had the head of Twitter Legal, Jack Dorsey himself, and somebody else on from Twitter to debate this guy. And I saw, it was 3 hours. I saw the thumbnail and I was like, this is epic. This is like
what was that on? What? Crystal and Cigar?
It was like it was on his show, the Joe Rogan Experience. He had a debate between this Twitter journalist who was like kicked off Twitter and Jack Dorsey. And nobody watched it because nobody actually wants to see a debate. Like, this guy will go on with RFK.
Everybody will watch
3 minutes and be like, I don't care about mitochondria. I don't care about the CDC.
I think it would be a huge episode.
I would be really curious to see. I think people will talk about it happening, and no one will actually watch it because very few people care.
There was a vegan versus a non-candy. There was like a vegan, non-vegan episode debate that took off because it was like a KO for the vegan advocate who made that documentary called...
Right, so...
What was the documentary called?
Forks Over Knives?
No, it was about bodybuilders and strength trainers who are all vegan. He made this movie about it. Whatever, he made a big movie about veganism. And he's a vegan advocate. But that was a huge episode. I think this topic... Everybody wants to hear the real debate.
If it's a show and RFK demolishes him, or RFK gets like, booted out of the room and embarrassed, that'll be something. But if it's just like a cordial debate where there's like no clear winner but both sides make their case, I'm telling you, I really don't think it would like that many people would tune into it. Truly.
Yeah, and that's where I would disagree. I would just say I think this topic, everyone would just want to hear how it goes down, almost like a big sporting event. Like, it's such Rogan's platform, this whole thing, this subject, there hasn't been two people debating it the way, like, it's more like somebody goes on CNN, MSNBC and says, oh, they're all conspiracy theorists and it's misinformation, disinformation, and people go on Rogan and talk about what they think. You don't. I think it's if Peter McCullough or Robert Malone got on Rogan to debate Sanjay Gupta, I think it would be.
I think people want to hear what they want to hear in a dramatic fashion. I don't think they actually want facts and figures and debate. The same way you look at the comments on our like woke video, like people they watch 3 seconds of it, say what they want to say, get it out of their system, and that's their experience. And
yeah, I mean, look,
I would
whether
love to
whether
see
or not whether or not it would
Let's
change
see it.
anyone's mind or move anybody, you're probably right. But I still think people would it would make a splash.
I don't even think anyone would tune in. Let's see. I really hope he does it.
He's not going to do it. He's not going to. He's
not
only
gonna do
anything. He's in his position, and he has everything to lose and nothing to gain.
Yeah. So
Unless he really thinks he can
see. It was interesting to see the response. So afterwards I googled RFK Rogan, and the big articles that came up was RFK says the CIA assassinated his uncle, and he's taking precautions. Their big thing from the episode was like, can you believe this guy thinks the CIA killed JFK, and he's taking precautions? Like, this guy is nuts, and you're just like you're so boring. Like, no one thinks Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK anymore. That's crazy. No one thinks that anymore. And like your big like takedown of him is that the CIA killed JFK and he's crazy for taking precautions. Like you've become so stale. I think that was Rolling Stone's headline, who published his article. They were the ones who published his article on vaccines like 10 years ago. I was like, you've become so boring and stale that like you're supposed to be counterculture. You're Rolling Stone. And your big thing is like, this guy's crazy because he believes our intelligence agencies are lying to us. And I'm just like, you're so out of touch. And this guy's going to get so big before you even realize what's happening, because you're so out of touch with what's going on.
There's a certain thing that happened from COVID onward where you start to read into things where the person from the institution making the statement clearly thinks this is common sense, and everybody doesn't. They don't even have to make a case for anything. Whether it's like a Fauci or CDC thing, or the like this guy Hortez, or like what you just said, was that New York Times? Who did that article?
That was the Rolling Stone magazine.
Rolling Stone, where they're assuming common knowledge, like, isn't he crazy, right? We all think that, and that we all mentality in them is just shrinking and shrinking, and they're not aware of it. Yeah. It's almost like the guy in the room who's like, "Am I right, people?" And it's now, and it used to be like, "Of course, we all agree," and now it's like, "Am I right, people?" And it's like. Yeah. Increasingly shrinking.
There's an amazing show, that show The Idol that's on HBO now. So Rolling Stone put out a story that the production of The Idol was a mess. So The Idol put out a clip about the scene where someone from Rolling Stone comes to the biggest pop star in the world and says, "We want you to be on our cover." And her response is basically like, "Wait, you want me to be on Rolling Stone's cover and you're not going to pay me for it? Like, I have 10 times as many followers as you do, my account. You should be paying me to be on Rolling Stone's cover. You should be paying me to be on my account."
I definitely saw this clip.
It was with The Weeknd. The Weeknd is in the show. But like the point is just like they have this legacy voice that is just becoming. I'm basically like, I'm a week away from buying an RFK flag and like putting it on my truck.
Why?
I feel like the Trump people probably did. I'm starting to understand. I'm not like so sold on him. I don't know if he's gonna win, or like
you're not sold on him, but you're willing to get a flag.
I'm saying that's how I feel. Like, I get the excitement that Trump people felt of like, you're not listening to my guy. My guy is gonna show all you people. And like and you start to like push out like any sort of common sense when you're just like, this is fun, and this is my team, and like I'm on it, and I'm gonna take this ride for as long as it goes.
Yeah, the fact that he's not being taken seriously is firing you up. Not that you agree with him, but take it seriously.
Yeah. And like, he says one or two things. I don't think him and Trump could be compared so much. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, and I'll find out he's a total crackpot, and I'll look silly for saying all this. I don't really think that you can conflate them, but he says one or two things I've never heard a politician say, and I'm like, yeah, man, like let's go, I don't see the cracks in you right now, so it's fun.
He'd have a lot of things to answer for as far as like vaccine skepticism in general. COVID vaccine is a different thing entirely, but vaccines in general, there's all this like just ensuing doubt and hesitancy with these big correlation causation claims. This has happened and this has happened. And I've yet to hear, like, I mean, I'm not reading studies, who is? But what I am knowing is that a lot of infectious diseases that used to exist do not. And vaccine science, in my guess is they're responsible for that.
It's pretty scary if you have kids to think about a president who would like make vaccines harder to get. You know what I'm saying? Like that's like
I'm
a
just
terrifying
that's why I
proposition.
think it causes such a reaction from the medical community or establishment, whatever you want to call it. It's because like you're setting us backwards in their mind. You're bringing back measles. You're bringing back polio. You're bringing back things that COVID was nothing compared to this stuff. You couldn't go to the beach. You couldn't go in the pool because you're afraid your kid was going to be crippled, and we got rid of it. Smallpox. I'm like, are you against the smallpox vaccine? Is he against
his larger point, and then I think so. His larger point, and then we can move on to this from this.
Yeah.
His larger point is that the things we think have been making us safe and healthy are actually not the safest, healthiest things we could be doing. For example, and then we can move on, like the Ukraine war. I think his stance is like it's been pitched to us as it's actually safer to get involved in the war because if we don't, we're all worse off because Russia will become this and China that. It's actually the safest thing to do is to go to war, and his stance is like no, the safest thing to do is to have peace. And then with vaccines, is like the safest thing to do is inject yourself with all of these things so you don't get polio. And I think just his response is like, no, there's actually like a safer way to be healthy than that. And like the narrative we've been eating for 50, 60, 70 years of what the orthodoxy is on how to be safe and healthy, there's actually like there's you can dig deeper into that and there are different approaches to it than these very, very long held beliefs on what is safe and healthy.
Sure, but you see where that's a very sloppy, messy thing to say because he's not saying if you're saying vaccines are one path to wellness and health and they're legitimate and they do a massive amount of benefit, much more than harm, but we can also explore alternatives. There are other things you could do in terms of nutrition and exercise and other kinds of treatment and holistic medicines. If he's making that case, I don't think it's as controversial. But he's not saying that.
Right. Yeah. And his voice is so messed up.
His voice is so messed up. He's saying vaccines are more harmful than good, basically, which is, to me, quite crazy to say.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm just again, I'm more interested in like the people behind the ideas than the ideas, and I think that person with that viewpoint is a very like electric viewpoint in 2023.
It doesn't mean everything he says doesn't have value, because it is an interesting question why all this other stuff is going on. Valid question. Obesity, diabetes, question. A lot of these diseases on the rise. One has to ask themselves why. There's an answer. I don't know. I don't think it's because of the polio vaccine.
It's those kind of questions. I think people feel like we're at a turning point, especially with AI.
That's why a guy like him is healthy, because he brings up these questions. And even if he has the wrong answer,
and we're at a turning point where I think a lot of people are thinking like we need different approaches and different solutions to the problems that the solutions from the last 70 years aren't working anymore. We need new solutions and we need new questions and we need new approaches and here's one guy who's actually saying, hey, I have a new approach for the next 50 years, like, and no one else is saying that, and it's like I think that's going to appeal to a lot of people.
Yeah, but the libertarian in me says we don't need new ones. We just need to do the ones that work, that often get ignored.
Well, I think a lot of people would say, yeah, all right, whatever. Yeah, all right, let's go. Let's move on to. We wanted to talk about Tim Ferriss on Common